Holy crap, Marvel made a movie. And what makes it work isn't just the performances, which are outstanding, it's that this movie clearly doesn't have the same burden of blending in with the rest of the MCU. It's a lot more focused, and with that focus, you know, there is some sacrifices that were made. This movie is clearly made for maybe shorter attention spans, and there is kind of a noticeable choppiness, especially for anybody that saw the trailers. Like, there's a lot of scenes here missing. Heck, there's full characters missing from this movie. So while it doesn't quite feel like false advertising, you do feel where this movie was trimmed down, and as a result, you do feel these like gaps. To me, what First Steps gets the most right is the team itself, not just as individuals, but like as a unit. Each member of the team feels very distinct, yet they're clearly pulling their own weight, and you really get the vibe that they rely on each other and could not, do this without each other. Whether the moment is big or small, the movie does a great job of just reinforcing that this is a family and they work best when they're together. So starting with Sue Storm, who is played by Vanessa Kirby, I'll be honest guys, like this was the casting decision that I was the most on the fence for. I don't really have much to back that up with outside of the fact that I've only really seen her in like the Mission Impossible movies, and that character is such a departure from who Sue is, so I just didn't know if she had the skills to bring Sue to life, and I honestly could not have been more wrong. Vanessa Kirby is amazing in this. She brings this like maturity to Sue that I loved. Sue in this movie is the anchor to the team, to the family. Everyone else seems to be able to confide in her, and she takes that seriously. But she's not just support either. She's very capable, she's a great fighter, she's highly competent, and she has skills that maybe the others don't, like public speaking. Pedropascal plays Reed Richards, and I get it guys, like we've seen him everywhere. Some people are really sick of him. Personally, I don't really care. I feel like it's really just the internet being the internet. And personally, when I watch movies, it's just like a complete reset. I'm not paying attention as much to the actor as I am to the character. That's just me, but I do understand where people are coming from. Reed in this story is a completely different type of MCU genius. He's not like charming like Tony Stark or condescending like Stephen Strange.
Douchebag.
He's a lot more reserved, he's a lot more obsessive, and he shows that he doesn't have as much confidence in his personality as he does in his brain. What really sold me on this portrayal was how he locks in when things are going down. Like Reed, for most of the movie, is kind of just the big brain behind everything, but when things start going down, this man locks in. He's making decisions and calculations, and it really shows that like team leader aspect, that when it counts, he will step up. And it's great because it gives him a time to shine while not overshadowing the other three, so they can have their moments to be, of value. But you also see how, like, without his family around, he could be pushed to be a lot, darker or more clinical. Shades of the Maker are kind of laid down here. And although he is, portrayed as the smartest man alive, it is kind of weird to see it done in a vacuum. You know what I mean? Like, there is no one for really Reed to like bounce off of, whether it's like Tony Stark or Doctor Who or Rick Sanchez. What makes them work so well as geniuses on screen is that we're shown them through the lens of like an average person. Not saying that the other three are portrayed as dumb. It's actually the opposite. They're all very smart, competent people. I also was kind of disappointed with like his stretchy powers. I feel like the 2005 version did a lot of creative stuff with it, even if it looked kind of janky. Whereas this movie, and I think, director Matt Shackman talked about it a bit, they wanted to keep it realistic where he can't create his own body mass. So once he's stretched out to a certain extent, like he can't just go past that because he's out of like organs and shit to stretch out. And I think it's a cool looking effect. I think it makes sense and it's grounded. But, did we need it to be grounded? Especially with characters like Luffy out there in the world, I feel like we have a lot of potential for some cool shit. Regardless, this version of Reed felt very grounded, and his relationship with Sue and the rest of the characters felt very real. Next up, we have Johnny Storm, played by Joseph Quinn. And I don't know if it was like the Stranger Things hype way back in the day that ruined him for me. I just feel like I'm always doubting this guy, and he always shuts me up. Johnny in this movie is an absolutely refreshing take on the character. He's cocky, he's impulsive, he's trying to prove himself, and he's still kind of a ladies' man, but this movie definitely tones it down. I actually went back and rewatched the 2005 version, and that Johnny, so it's nice that they gave him a little bit more depth. I do wish we got to see him interact more with like the world around him, kind of give Johnny that social butterfly aspect that, we're familiar with. Like I said earlier, this movie being super focused does come with sacrifices, and that is one of them. Then we got Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, played by Eben Moss Backrack. I think he's the most human character in the whole film, which is saying something considering he, he's a rock person. You get the sense that his like transformation kind of made him more in touch with his humanity. I feel like Eben had kind of the hardest challenge out of them all, not because of just like the whole motion capture aspect of it, but going back to the 2005 films, I feel like the Thing was the character that held up the most throughout the years and the character that they got the most right back then. He was the only one that could really do a worse job. And that being said, I feel like his character is the one that kind of suffered the most with the edits, where you kind of feel like you get a lot of the beginning of his character's arc and the ending of his character's arc, and are just left to fill in the blanks in the middle, and you really get the sense that whatever was there was cut out. I mean, he still does get plenty of like standout material. Honestly, they all do. And together, the four of them just work. No one is the comedic relief. No one is like the sidekick. This is a team movie and it feels like it. The movie perfectly ties in their character development to the main plot. The team evolves not just because the story says so, but because their decisions, their failures, and their instincts are driving the plot forward. And decisions do have to be made because Galactus is a coming and he is hungry. He's played wonderfully by Ralph Ineson. And listen, when he shows up and is like, hey, I'm gonna eat this planet, the team is finally faced with the challenge that they cannot punch their way out of. I heard someone say that Galactus feels less like a villain and more like a natural disaster, and I totally get that. I think that's how the movie plays it. Yes, he is a bit of a jerk about it, but at the end of the day, dude's gotta eat and Earth is on the menu. Any of us who saw the post-credit scene for Thunderbolts kind of started to guess how that was gonna play out. And that framing does turn the stakes more inward, and it's not just about whether the team can win, but what are they willing to lose. We also have the Silver Surfer, aka Shalabal, in this movie, and she was an absolute scene stealer. Not only does she deliver some of the sauciest, visual spectacle that Marvel has put out in a long time, but she's played with such nuance that it's hard to imagine anybody but Julia Garner in that role. And I love that she's not just like some evil obstacle, she is a reflection of the moral choice the team has to make in this film. So yeah, she absolutely crushes it. I wish we got more of her. I do think that she's also someone that had some scenes cut. So I feel like we were meant to fill in a lot of the gap here, but the film clearly has space to fit more in. You've probably heard plenty of people gushing about that retro futuristic style, and I am right there with them. We got flying cars and boxy computers and like robot butlers. We got production designer Kasra Farahani, who you know from Loki, and director Matt Shakman, who directed all of WandaVision. They teamed up and absolutely sauced out this film. There was so much detail in every scene, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was just like fun to look at. The Baxter building feels like a real home. It's not like this movie is rejecting realism. We talked about that with like Reed's powers. It does feel tangible, but it kind of starts to lean into this like magical territory. For example, like Reed's clothes will stretch with him without explanation, and Johnny's clothes won't burn off when he catches fire. And I just liked it because why do we care so much about stuff like that? This is way more fun. Also, I feel like a lot of the set pieces in this film, prioritize the emotional aspect of it over the spectacle, yet still deliver on that spectacle aspect, so it kind of really makes you feel a lot more with all the crazy action that's happening. Basically what I'm saying is that this movie looks sick and it's emotional. And of course the soundtrack is spectacular, and I would love to play some of the songs for you, but I am a very tiny channel and they will obliterate me. But if you want to help me out and subscribe, that would be nice, and that one day maybe I could play all the copywritten music I ever wanted. But yeah, so First Steps feels distinct, not only in the way it looks, but in the way it sounds and feels, even if that MCU studio polish is a bit present. And here's honestly where this movie gets a bit rocky. For a movie that is so focused on like character and tone, the pacing can feel a little bit jittery. And like I said before, if you watched these trailers, you know that there is a lot missing from this movie. Like, what happened to my boy John Malkovich? And it is clear that they are targeting more of a quick attention span. I'm not saying that's good or bad, it just is what it is, but it does impact how the story flows. And while sometimes it's just presented in like a scene going by too quick, most of the time it feels like we are missing the kind of connective tissue that makes these like character decisions feel earned. Not to say it's broken, but it's not seamless. I do get the sense that the movie is playing it a bit safe. This movie clearly isn't trying to reinvent Marvel, it's trying to remind us why we love Marvel in the first place. So while most things do work in its favor, you do kind of walk away wishing that they took a bit, bolder of a stance or bigger swings in this film. So where do we even go from here? I feel like Fantastic Four is kind of meant to set up and kick off this new Marvel era. Anybody that's been like roughly paying attention to Doomsday and how that's been going, it doesn't really seem promising yet. Marvel hasn't really laid out a roadmap for what we're doing or where we're heading. And that's not like it's necessary, but when you start hearing production rumors about like the script not being finished and cast and crew being fired and replaced mid-production, it does kind of make you feel like, what is this all for? And to me, it feels like Marvel is 100% looking at this film and seeing if they need to make any pivots and changes to Doomsday. You know, my opinion, which is not really a rare one, is that I don't want Doomsday and like Secret Wars just to be a cameo fest. If Marvel is using this movie to kind of test the waters for what they want to do moving forward, then I think that's a good sign. This is the best they've done in a while. So I'm not really sure where we're at with Doomsday. I'm not sure if they know where they're at. But if they can make it something like this, where it's, you know, a heartfelt story focused on characters, then I'll be watching. And now begins the long wait for Spider-Man. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.